Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Dan, you and I have been talking about cyber threats and the effect it has on small business many times. We have a really interesting guest now, Lawrence Pingree, the Senior Vice President of Product Management at SonicWall. He's here to talk about their latest survey and analysis. Lawrence, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir.
Well, tell us a little bit first about your background, because I know it's very interesting. You just jumped over from the other side.
Yeah, I did. I was a Gartner analyst for almost the good part of 10 years, and Firewall market was my primary coverage area. So just a little bit more about my background. I've installed roughly 550 or so firewalls in my career, written a couple of books on firewalls, and been in the field as a security engineer, an architect, etc. So and now it's my time to move the needle on the SonicWall product line.
Well, I'm going to ask what appears to be a stupid question, but it came up this weekend. Do you really need a firewall?
It's an essential ingredient in a defense in depth strategy. It's required by almost all mandates out there to control network traffic, and even today they're even more essential because essentially the defense that we provide through analyzing for malware, thwarting attackers, etc., just means that they're an essential ingredient to your security strategy. So absolutely the answer is yes.
Well, I believe that, but it was a question that came up. But having said that, and tell us a little bit about SonicWall.
Sure. So SonicWall, our latest and greatest release, includes what we call Capture Security Center, which is sort of a single pane of glass that provides, centralized management of firewalls, analytics, and control against threats between network and endpoint. And we have a wide variety of solutions, including, as I said, endpoint prevention, endpoint detection, the network security product lines, which are, all the way from the low-end small business to the mid-size or mid-tier enterprises. We also have a web application firewall, virtual firewalls for cloud, and also email security. So pretty broad-based vendor.
But your latest survey, I see some of the results. Tell us some of the things that your survey indicates.
Sure.
It's scary as I read it.
It is scary. We've seen over the last 12 months essentially a 102% increase in malware volume over 2017. And primarily I would say that the best way to characterize why this is happening is that essentially the underground is automating the creation of malware. Traditional threats were thwarted through antivirus engines that would do what we call static analysis, they would just look at a file and determine whether it's good or bad based on simple things like hashing. Nowadays, the threat actors have become wise to this, and they're literally creating tools and even malware as a service offerings and ransomware as a service offerings that allow them to generate malicious code at a very fast pace. So this is leading to the increase of malware and variants of malware.
Well, I'm going to ask just one more question and turn it over to Dan. But there's ransomware where they do it to collect money, and
Yep.
and there's maliciousware where they just do it to cause trouble. Oh, and I guess my question, ransomware I can understand, but why did people do it? Because for malicious reasons. I mean, obviously, but I mean, to sit there and to plan this and to be mean about it, why do they do it?
Well, there's a lot of motivations for threat actors. We see a lot of teenagers and millennial type threat actors that play video games, and they get pissed off at somebody that they've been fighting online, and then they try to target them. They might be malicious against a competitor, for example, or a disgruntled employee, or a variety of reasons for the malicious style of malware. In most recent years, it's been state level actors that are essentially disrupting the systems of adversary countries, right? So, but essentially, the reason that ransomware is on the rise versus the maliciousware is that, generally speaking, threat actors want to maintain your system to be up and running, to have additional campaigns using your systems.
Oh, I have a lot of questions, but Dan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Let me. It's not my intention to put you on the hot seat, but a man of your caliber, I have to ask this question. Okay? You ready?
Sure.
Is it possible for the Russians to have hacked into our election?
It's absolutely possible for any external threat actor to create havoc within a political system and leverage malware to do so. Or even, if you think about traditional espionage, we've when I was at Gartner, I told clients, you can spend into oblivion with security, so you have to do measured response, but frankly, if you're trying to defeat an intelligence agency, it's going to be difficult for you because they can deploy physical assets, right? But the answer is yes, unequivocally yes, that these threat actors could certainly create problems for nations, not just the United States, but others, right?
Well, I want to follow that with another question, because
Sure.
I think there's a lot of confusion in my standpoint. I think a lot of Americans are confused, and you have a portfolio of products that can not only help me as a small businessman, but the government.
Absolutely.
But it seems to me that there's a lot of purposeful misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean there is, there's no question that a foreign government, because we do it ourselves,
Sure.
can go into the media, go into the internet, and send out propaganda and trolls, as they're called, and create links to databases or whatever to try and influence people about what they think about certain issues. It was interesting, the analysis was done after the shooting here in Florida, where I live, in the high school, how much the trolls were trying to manipulate the media and the message to try and influence the reaction. Trying to influence people through social media and through whatever other means is different to me than saying I'm going to be able to go into the system and change the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think it's possible to go into such a hugely decentralized system to physically actually change the outcome of an election?
Well, this is just a personal opinion, not necessarily a position of my company. But what I would say is that any system is breachable, right? And threat actors are constantly in a struggle to find new ways, creative ways of integrating into a system, breaching its security mechanisms, counterintelligence, all of these other things, right? So the reality is that it's my opinion that the public needs to be educated about, and have a sense of understanding that these actions are occurring, and therefore seek out, truthful sources of information. And I would say that information campaigns have existed since, basically in the 50s, right? Some of even World War II, the U.S. used deception campaigns against Germany, right? I mean, so there's all these things that have occurred in history to manipulate public opinion, but to do so in a distributed system like voting booths, for example, where you compromise those systems, I've seen reports where the security of those devices isn't that great, right? They could be improved. To do it on a mass scale is difficult. If I were an external party and wanted to disrupt the U.S., I would look to wherever we centralize that information, right? Where we bring that together from the polls and bring it together and do the counts and then data warehouse that information, right? So I would be most concerned about that process and not necessarily the individual voting machines.
Okay, so let's get back to more practical standpoint.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to a small businessman, a startup? Maybe he's got a few employees and he's got half a dozen computers or whatever.
Yep.
What's the basic kit of technology that they need to put in their system to give them some reasonable, not 100%, but some reasonable protections?
Right.
What are the components?
Well, what's happened in the firewall industry over the last couple of years or few years has been a unification of the endpoint with the network. And the real reason for that is that there are certain things that can be done well at the network layer, and there are other things that need to be done at the endpoint, and the two need to be married together in order to unify defense. And that's because, devices go mobile, that you go to a hotel. I'm in a hotel right now. And you need that mobile defense as well as when you're on network within your corporate headquarters or offices. What we've seen recently, and we think that is the most important protection that you need, is not only that endpoint defense with our Capture Client solution, but the ability to decrypt and inspect the encrypted sessions that are now very prevalent on the internet, right? So over the last few years, Google has pushed all websites to become SSL enabled, which is encryption. That encryption serves as a hiding place for threats. Now, our firewalls are designed to be able to intercept that and decrypt the sessions for seeking threats. Detecting and blocking them. And, right now, roughly 68% of traffic that we see is encrypted across our customer base. And that means that, the encrypted sessions, if they're not inspected, those threats get through. And if your endpoint defense isn't good enough, you'll be breached.
So what do they need to have? What's their toolkit? What's the basic toolkit for a small business?
From our portfolio, it would be our firewall product lines with SSL or DPI SSL, which is deep packet inspection for encrypted sessions, as well as our Capture ATP solution, which will analyze threats in a sandbox. And the way to describe a sandbox is it's kind of like a petri dish for malware. We look at behaviors of binaries as and PDFs and documents as they traverse through the firewall. The other solution that we have is Capture Client, which is an endpoint solution that looks for behaviors on your endpoint. And when those behaviors, when let's say a process starts to act strange, we can intercede and block those threats in real time. And those two solutions coupled together also they help unify your defense. So if you get telemetry from traffic through the network, it can also be used on our endpoint to defeat the threat when it arrives on the endpoint. So that unified. Yep. Go ahead.
Are those expensive?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's more expensive, frankly, to deal with ransomware. Last year I had a client that I can't name when I was at Gartner that had 1,500 employees that were out of work for a week because they had to recover their systems. I think it's much more costly, especially when we're talking a small business. If you don't spend, a few thousand on security, you are really putting your whole business potentially on the line, right? In a small business, most of them are, month to month. I mean, they're trying to deal with payroll, trying to deal with, other business aspects, and frankly, a bad ransomware attack can literally kill their business, right? And so, they, I think, they're the most critical to be able to bring, the specialized technology that we have down to them. And it's essential for them to have those kinds of defenses.
So we had a gentleman on almost a year ago, and this cybersecurity is something that we talk a lot about with experts like yourself. He made some observations that I would love to hear your perspective, whether you agree or disagree, or if you want to do no comment, that's fine too.
Sure.
He said sometimes the software that you can buy, commercially available software, and I also won't mention any names, that people don't realize that their computer system may have already built in a level of security more sophisticated than what they're buying in a package. And in fact, putting the package on the computer may interfere with the security system that's already built into the computer. Are you familiar with that issue?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what the biggest fear I have for folks in the field is that if you think you're going to get the same level of protection through a free product than you do with something that's purchased and there are people behind the scenes working on that solution, I think that's you've got to be somewhat naive, right?
Right.
Yes, there are vulnerabilities to deploying any software on any system. So you add software, you add potential vulnerabilities. But so I guess that angle of what they're saying is probably there's some truth to that. But the reality is that we've seen over and over that free malware protection is just not good enough. And the kinds of technology that we deploy, where you have to actually pay for, that is the most up to date and capable of dealing with today's threats. So I hate the fact that there are free antiviruses out there because they're just old technology, and the reason they're free is that it's old technology that is not effective.
He had two other suggestions, and then after that I have one more question, and I'll give it back to Don. But he had two other suggestions, which seemed so logical to me, I just couldn't believe it. He said, set up a policy in your company. When you go home for night, turn off your computer. Don't give the bad guys the ability while you're not there to hack into your system overnight, and you may never know that they're there. So he said, turn it off. And he said the most important thing is make sure you have the current update on your operating system.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I'll have two comments on that. So updating systems is absolutely critical. I would say that a good 90% of exploitation of systems is the fact that somebody didn't patch. The larger you get, and especially in small business, when you deploy software, if you don't maintain it and don't properly purchase support, you're putting yourself in a very precarious situation. And they essentially, the reality is you can always be hit, but patching is absolutely essential, for sure.
He also said, this is the last question, then I'll go to Don. He also said that the biggest threat to your system as a small business or even a large business is not from Russia. It's from a disgruntled employee.
I would not disagree with that. I would say threat actor-wise, the more knowledge you have of any corporate environment or small business environment, the more damage you can do, right? So the insider threat is certainly a heftier threat from a knowledge perspective. However, I would counter that and say that, by and large, there are capabilities you can deploy to monitor employees, and you can cut access and all of these things. To the point earlier about the time of day, in our solutions, you can preclude users from accessing at certain times of day or from certain locations through geolocation awareness. But you're absolutely right, and I think that the latest generation of capabilities that is being deployed in the security market is what we call user behavior analytics, where we apply behavioral models to users, and you can then use that to indicate when somebody might be becoming malicious or accessing things that they shouldn't be. But I 100% agree. Just like at your radio station, the two of you know everything about that place. Its vulnerabilities, right? So you could go destroy the radio tower. Where it's located, right? So
right.
It's a great point. But I would say that that's also the most likely to be. I would say that that's the one threat actor that is most likely to get arrested.
Okay. So before I give it back to Don, Larry, how can people get a hold of you? What's your website?
Sure.
How do they get a hold of you in your company?
It's SonicWall, SonicWall.com, SonicWall.com. And they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to respond to anyone that has questions.
Good. Don, back to you.
Well, I'm listening here, and I'm sitting here mentally reviewing my own system and realize how vulnerable I am. As a news organization, we have to take in a lot of information from a lot of different sources, and we can't tell people not to send attachments, etc. What are some of the rules that you think a company should establish in their emailing and their outside contacts?
Sure. Well, I think that like we have in our solutions, spear phishing prevention and detection is really important. I also think that anti-spam engines are critical in making sure that nefarious actors...
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there.
Sure.
I know what they mean, but phishing and ampersand, would you mind explaining them for our audience? Absolutely.
So what phishing is essentially just kind of like the reference to going to a river and throwing some bait in. In email realm, what threat actors do is they look up people on social media or LinkedIn. They find out an email address, and then they do targeted campaigns to try to get people to click on things or to open documents. And they essentially target the individual. And in doing so, you might, for example, one scenario that I know has happened over and over is somebody might say, "Hey, I'm buying a new TV. I'm getting it shipped soon." On social media, and a threat actor that has access to that information could then target them with, UPS notifications or FedEx shipment notifications, those kind of things. Or somebody's buying a house, and then They tout that online, and then the threat actor tries to, get in the middle of the wires that are going back and forth. A lot of times via email, there's communications between, banks and brokerages, et cetera. So those kind of situations you need to make sure that you're being aware of. In general, you need to have defense through your email and analyzing PDFs and documents, as well as your network and the endpoint. So we kind of see it as content security, and you apply content security around all of the different transactions that you perform.
That's really interesting. Every once in a while, I get a fax sent to me from an unknown source, and I immediately delete it. Is that another way they're trying to get into the system?
Absolutely. I mean, generally these days, faxes are received as PDFs, and PDFs from Adobe. Adobe PDFs are basically like a rich programming environment for threat actors, and they can embed all kinds of code in PDFs. And so we have a solution in our Capture ATP for network where we analyze PDFs in real time before they're delivered, and you can uncover those threats and we can block them. So I would recommend that now you should be always cautious of receiving documents. In a situation such as yours, where you receive lots of them, you might want to designate a special computer system where you isolate, that and don't have sensitive information on that system. That might be another way that you, as a smaller business or a radio show host, could isolate the threat and away from your sensitive data, right?
I'm going to ask one more question, then turn it back to Dan. Fascinating guest. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for being here. I just got an email from a friend of mine. She very seldom emails me, and when it opened, it said something like, wonderful, look at this. I immediately deleted that. Is that another form of malicious intent?
I mean, the thing that malware authors and threat actors are exploiting here is they're exploiting our trust, right? And when you get emails that are very context starved like that, where you don't know whether this is real or not, I would always recommend to do just what you did, which is to delete. Unless you are, expecting something ahead of time, I think that it's important for you to avoid those scenarios. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick that we're seeing on the ransomware side, which is really, really scary, is that some of the recent ransomware campaigns have been doing things where they are enticing users not just to pay them, but to do kinetic things. So one example just recently is that a malware or a ransomware was pushing people to go play a video game online. And essentially these kind of kinetic or enticement-based ransomware is imagine if I wanted everyone to buy a certain type of vehicle or maybe go bully someone or whatever. Ransomware is now moving towards these physical sort of things where you're instructing unwilling participants to go do certain things in the real world. That to me is really scary.
What's the purpose in doing that? Forcing me to go play a video game. I mean, what is the benefit to the ransomware developer of doing that? Just the pleasure of having someone forcing somebody to do something?
Yeah, and what my worry is that one was a fairly benign sort of activity, but you could essentially force people to send somebody an email, or call them on the phone, or do a variety of other things through ransomware. I mean, sort of the sky's the limit when it comes to how bad people can be, and so I'm worried about that movement occurring. And especially in the days of cyberbullying and all of this, right?
Absolutely, that is scary. We're talking with Lawrence Pingree. He's with SonicWall, and I'm going to turn it back down to Dan.
I was listening to your conversation with Don, and let me give you an example of a threat. You talked about somebody being forced to go to a video game. Going to that video game, and you have to buy points or coins or whatever, put up your email or your credit card information, could be devastating. They could go in very quickly and charge huge amounts of money and destroy your credit, and so I can see that could be a problem. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to sound like I'm an expert, because I'm not. I just want to ask somewhat of a technical question. Sure. How much of what you and your company have produced would be in the category of logarithms?
Logarithm. Are you talking about algorithms or machine learning?
Algorithms.
Yeah. So our technology behind the scenes uses machine learning all the time, and essentially we've been using them since I guess the 90s. And essentially, malware authors do a variety of things to obfuscate or hide their malware. And we have to apply algorithms that learn, and machine learning algorithms to learn these behaviors and automatically categorize malware as malicious by looking at a variety of factors: the behavior, the way that the files are being packed, or whether they're an archive or not, or whether they're encrypted or not, etc. We also use machine learning within our endpoint technology through a partnership with SentinelOne, where we apply machine learning to the behaviors of the processes within your endpoint itself. So we know the behaviors that are occurring with each of your software packages, and we can nab with those behavioral algorithms whether they become malicious or not, and we can stop them. So machine learning, although it's been touted recently as a new thing, we've been doing it for many years. We are refining it always, and one of our refinements is in our Capture ATP solution, where we have what we call real-time deep memory inspection, and that's RTDMI. And what that is we analyze the behaviors of memory to nab new malware strains. And essentially that applies the machine learning to the way that memory behaves.
So let me ask you a very specific question. Over the 4th of July holiday, a small newspaper in Texas published on their Facebook page excerpts of the Declaration of Independence. That site was banned, and they said that the document that their algorithms decided was hate speech. And okay. And they took their site down, and when Facebook was made aware that this was the Declaration of Independence, they put it back up, but they indicated that they had to investigate how that happened, because there are supposedly, quote, no humans involved in the decision-making process.
Yep.
And I think that that's probably, in my opinion, not an expert, not true, because somebody at some point in time started that snowball rolling down the hill. and so I'm curious, is that this decision-making, this intellectual property, this the whole idea of computers being able to grow and their thinking process, whatever the right word is.
Sure.
I'm concerned that we are headed down a path where our communications among ourselves and our clients is going to be interrupted by artificial intelligence that's going to say, that's hate speech, that's racial, we're going to block it from happening. And and we can't do anything about it.
I think it's an interesting observation. I'll further to your point. Google I/O just this year, they demonstrated fully autonomous voice recognition solution where your digital assistant calls and schedules appointments for you, and it interacts with humans. What I would say is machine learning is definitely not perfect. What machine learning attempts to do is classify things, and then you once you classify something, you apply a rules engine to it. So
right.
I think all of us have used Siri, and when or maybe Google's voice recognition technology, and if you write an email with it, a good portion of it comes out gobbledygook. Because essentially you're translating things in real time. Now, I think that it's going to get better, but in machine learning land, there's always what we call false positives, and essentially the technology and the neural networks that are being used to do these decision trees just need to get better, but I'm not terribly fearful that the content will ultimately be blocked by everyone, because when there are those false positives, you can report them, and certainly with SonicWall, if we block something that a user says is valid, we will recategorize it, and you can resubmit it and let us know that there's a problem. But I think the fear is that people don't want justifiable content like that, like your example, to be blocked. And yeah, I'm a little scared of that too. I'm actually more scared of automation, you being used to replace humans completely. I've seen, articles written that are completely machine written, those kind of things. I'm actually more fearful of that than I am of, the specific example you used.
Well, we've been talking to Lawrence Pingree. Back to you, Don.
Unfortunately, Lawrence, we've run out of time. Your website again for people and how they can reach you?
Sure, it's SonicWall.com.
And we're talking with Lawrence Pingree, and I'm going to spell it Pingree.
Correct.
And you're available on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. A link to your website, SonicWall, will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other Recalculating radio program, and you can tell us what guests you'd like to hear. Lawrence, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Marcus Lemonis, J.D. Powers, and John Scully, and 100 other presidents and experts contributed to Recalculating the book. Why did all these people agree to contribute to the book? I'm Don Mazzella, and I'm the editorial director of Small Business Digest. And for 20 years, we have been offering small business leaders information and data to increase profits. Recalculating the book was named the best small business book by the Independent Press Association. Whether you need help with marketing, staffing, finance, operations, technology, or many other subjects, they're all here in Recalculating the book. They're now available at Amazon at a reduced cost. We've also created the radio program Recalculating on recalculating.biz.
Welcome back to Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful. Now it's time for Money in Motion. Dan Perkins is our resident expert in making the money you earn work as hard as you do. Here is Dan Perkins.
Well, Don, we are both type 2 diabetics, and I'm more recently diagnosed than you were, and my learning curve is accelerating rapidly. But recently I had a discussion with my doctor of the link between diabetes and dementia. Interesting that my doctor pointed out, I knew that in the case of both dementia and diabetes, that blacks and Hispanics have a much higher incidence of dementia than any other race, and didn't think about a connection that the same thing is true of dementia. Blacks and Hispanics are disproportional up to their size percentage have dementia, and the commonality between both diabetes and dementia is the two things that have the greatest impact on these two diseases are diet and exercise. And I've seen firsthand, by taking blood sugar counts before I exercise and after I exercise, the dramatic impact that exercise can have on reducing blood sugar. Of course, it also helps to have a low sugar or no sugar diet and watch your carbohydrates. But the thing that's important is that we have the Center for Disease Control estimates, Don, that about 40% of the adult population of the United States is either type 2 or pre-type 2 diabetics in the country. And the type 2 diabetes in young people is exploding just in the United States. It's all over the world.
You're absolutely right. As far as the dementia goes, some people have said I already have it, but what the heck? But for many years I had Dr. Stanley Mirsky as my physician for diabetes, and he wrote one of the best-selling books on diabetes. Unfortunately, he passed, but he always said to all of his patients, the key to it is moderation. He said, whatever you do, do it in moderation. Unfortunately, when you brought up about Hispanics and blacks, their diets are saturated with all of the wrong foods, the fatty oils that they fry in, etc., and a lot of their dishes. And when he addressed those audiences, Dr. Mirsky used to say, if you want to prevent diabetes, you're going to have to change your diet. He said, not totally, but somewhat. he said more importantly, you needed to get out and exercise more. All of the things that you've been talking about, and his book, which went through 13 editions, the 14th actually came out after he died, discussed that. And, we're on our site and in our promotional efforts, we've been talking about this new book that that's come out, new dieting. I get what I'd like to call lifestyle management plan. It really has made a difference to some of the people we have sent the book to. It's important that people take the first step and acknowledge that they either have diabetes or are prone to it, and they need to decide whether they're going to take control of their lives and find a plan that helps them live longer.
And a more productive life. And I think that on our recalculating.biz website is a link to the Diabetes Solution Kit, which is really 6 books in one that helps the person who has been diagnosed as a diabetic or recently diagnosed, and they have to look at the things that they need to do in order to extend their life, as you say. And for $20, they can get this book online. They can download it to their smartphone or their computer. I like the idea of downloading it to your smartphone because you can carry the booklet with you wherever you go because it's on your smartphone. And as I said, that's you can get a link to that just by going to our recalculating.biz website, and I think it's the upper left-hand corner. There's a link to the Diabetes Solution Kit, and I think it's important. But I know we're talking about all the foods that are typically being eaten, and I used to say, even though I haven't been diagnosed that long, people were talking to me about the sugar that I take in, and a lot of people who are concerned about diabetes and concerned about health say it's the sugar sodas and the sugar drinks that are making the difference. And in reality, it's not. The sugar that has the greatest damage to the pancreas is the carbohydrates that we ingest. And if you look at in the case of the Mexican food with high concentrations of beans, rice, tortillas, all the things that are incredibly high in carbohydrates, they turn to sugar, and so that the blood sugar just races in a diet that is rich in those kinds of ethnic foods. And culturally, it becomes difficult for Hispanics or blacks to really change their diet to a totally different way of eating. There is no cure for diabetes. There is no cure, and there's no cure for dementia. But the idea that we can control our blood sugar by what we eat and the exercise that we go to and do, it's important. And for me, recently being diagnosed, it's important to me now to spend the time to communicate to people, hey, there's a problem here you need to be aware of. And 40% of the adult population, that's an astronomical number of people. And just think what it's doing to the cost of health care. And as much as I hate to think about it, amputation of fingers and toes and feet and hands, if you don't take care of yourself, that's the ramifications of diabetes. So it's a chronic disease that is not curable. You can control your blood sugar through diet and exercise and medication. And my goal, Don, is through diet and exercise, I want to control my blood sugar to the point that I don't need to take medication, and I can manage my diabetes by paying attention to what I eat and getting exercise. And I think that's an important part of the whole treatment process. If I'm healthier and I can get my diabetes under control, I believe I can affect those odds about me getting dementia.
You know, Dan, you're absolutely right. And someone said to me, why should I spend, with all of the free medical advice around, why should I spend $20 for something like this? And, you know, I have a very good answer. When you pay for something, you're more apt to follow the advice than if you get it free. It's one of the more interesting things. Dr. Mirsky used to say there was all the pharmaceutical companies gave away the same information that was in his book, but people bought his book because that was the reason. It forced them to realize that they had spent money, so they better take the advice. And that's one of the reasons why the book is priced as it is. It's not expensive, but it's designed that there's some skin in the game for the individuals. And all of us who have diabetes should put more than just the skin in their game. They should put both feet inside. Back to you, Dan.
I agree with you totally. I do believe that having written the book on dementia and spent a lot of time with researchers, how much education is important. And now with the diabetes, education is very important, and understanding the amount of carbohydrates that you're taking in are very important, and so you're going to have to change and put a different kind of discipline in your life. And I think that if you have a plan or a roadmap, there's an old Chinese proverb, Don, that says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Well, if you have diabetes, you have to have a plan. You have to know where you're going. What are your goals? And then you've got to develop a plan that allows you to get to the goals that you want. And I set as a goal when I finished the classes that I wanted to reduce my carbohydrate level, which in turn would reduce my sugar, which in turn would have a positive impact on my blood sugar. So I had a discussion with my wife about eating a couple of nights ago, and I said, you know, I really used to like to eat, and today I guess I feel like I'm eating to survive. It's not as much fun as it used to be, but that's just the reality of life with being a diabetic. If I eat all the things that I shouldn't, it's going to impact me. And I think the other thing is that
well, Dan, I'd like to interrupt you there because that's discussed in the book. But I will tell you that's an absolute normal occurrence for people when they first get the diagnosis that they are. And I'll give you a great example. I used to put a lot of sugar in my coffee, and I used to love Cokes. But over the years, I cannot now put sugar in my coffee, nor can I drink non-diet sodas, because your body and your mind gets used to the fact that you can't have them. You're right. Right now, you're going through that stage where someone called it the worst withdrawal symptoms. But over time, you're going to discover that your love of the foods are going to take you back. You just have to go adjust it. I'm giving you that advice as a man who's dealt with diabetes for over 20 years, and I'm sure I've told you my mother and aunts all had diabetes, but the answer is when you change your diet, it kind of gets to you, but after a while, you kind of get used to it. And more importantly, you sneak these treats every once in a while, and they taste so much better.
Yeah, I guess. One thing a piece of advice that I learned that really shocked me, that I would like to give to our listeners, especially those ones that are diabetic, the non-sugar sweeteners, and I'm not going to mention any of them by name, but I heard from my doctor something that was just appalling to me. She said, go look at the labels of the artificial sweeteners. And what you're going to find is, spelled in a totally different way, the main ingredient is in a packet is very, very small. So in order to create the volume that they need to put it in a packet, you know what they put in with the artificial sweetener, Don? Sugar. Sugar. You go to look at any of the artificial sweeteners, including the natural ones, and you look at them, and what you'll see is you'll see dextrose, you'll see corn syrup. Those are all sugars. They're not called sugar, they're called something else. So be real careful. And I don't understand this. Just to get, again, packaging. If you buy a box of sugar-free Jell-O, it has sugar in it. But if you if you go into the grocery store and you buy the pre-made Jell-O in the plastic cup, no sugar. You have to become a detective now to begin to read the labels to understand all the things that they can talk about that are sugars, but they don't call sugars. So it's important that we understand that sugar is the ultimate culprit, but it isn't just cane sugar. There are other kinds of sugar and carbohydrates in bread and pasta and in cakes and cookies and pies and tortillas and even in vegetables. Vegetables have carbohydrates. Counting your carbohydrates every day is something you're going to be doing the rest of your life. And I appreciate the encouragement but my desire, and I'll be able to eat things, will get better because, it's not any fun eating. And my wife is really working really hard to try and cook meals that are very sensitive to diabetes. So in closing, I want to, again, encourage our listeners to go to recalculating.biz and look in the upper left-hand corner, I think, for the Diabetic Solution Kit link. Go there, invest $20, and buy something that you'll use probably for the rest of your life. This is Dan Perkins.
And this is Don Mazzella. Dan, before we go any further, I want our audience to know about your new runaway hit book on Alzheimer's disease and how it affects teenagers.
Yeah, Don, thank you. The book is called Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? It's a book written primarily for children ages 9 to 12, but really needs to be read by the entire family. And what I try to do is I try to take the subject matter of dementia and the challenges to a different level in the form of a mystery story with my two little detectives, two little girls, Hudson and Charlotte. And it really creates a breakthrough opportunity for small children and parents and families to begin to understand the problem with dementia. See, Don, the real challenge is that the children are the forgotten people. Mom and Dad spend so much time working to try and take care of Mom and Dad, they don't take the time to explain to the children what's going on in Grandma or Grandpa's brain. So you can buy it at Amazon.com, or you can order it through your local bookstore or any online bookstore besides Amazon has it available. Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? Illustrations are spectacular. A story by Dan Perkins.
Your runaway bestseller, new book.
Why Can't Grammy Remember Me by Dan Perkins.
Thank you for being with us today. From Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.